In 2015 federal election, foreign money and third parties were very active. One of the worst offenders was the Tides Foundation. Tides has been funding anti-pipeline activism for years. Between 2009 and 2015, Tides made over 400 payments to anti-oil sands and anti-pipeline groups. My question is simple. If this NDP government doesn't have a soft spot for Tides, why don't you file a case against them for interference in the 2015 election?
Honourable Minister of Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our government has made sure that our elections financing rules are some of the strongest in the country, including strong protections against third-party advertising. Any third-party advertiser needs to register with Elections Alberta and needs to disclose their donors, increasing the transparency so that we know where big money is in play in our political system, and all Albertans can be aware of that. This is groundbreaking. It was passed last session. I'm quite proud that we now have these rules in place.
For supplemental.
Given the Tides Foundation gave $615,000 to STAND, the Pembina Institute, Environmental Defence and Equator, four groups who helped develop the NDP's climate plan, and given the National Director for STAND, Karen Mahone, is serving as an oil sands advisor to this Premier, while at the same time she is working to destroy the Kinder Morgan pipeline, why is the NDP government denying their involvement with Tides Foundation when the proof is in the pudding?
Mr. Speaker, we are incredibly proud of the fact that with our very first bill, we took corporate and union money out of campaigns, Mr. Speaker. It was very important and long overdue. It's time to make sure that we ensure that the people of Alberta have as strong a voice possible, and fortunately, we have a majority government and the ability to do that, no matter what the members opposite try to do. Mr. Speaker, there are, as the member said, very clear guidelines around third-party advertising. We take them very seriously, and we hope the members opposite abide by the legislation and ensure that corporations don't buy tickets to fundraisers.
Second supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, given the New Venture Fund started a website called Dirty Oil Sands, which, according to the Financial Post, was registered to Zipporah Berman, the Premier's other top oil sands advisor, and given the Dirty Oil Sands campaign conceivably received funds from foreign governments, why is the NDP government working with anti-Alberta organizations like Tides and radical activists like Karen Mahone and Zipporah Berman, who are clearly on the take from people who would ruin Alberta?
Honourable members, all honourable members, but specifically be cautious about the use of names in the House and any allegations about their character, because remember, they cannot be represented in this House. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this side of the government has taken a different approach because we know for far too long the other side wanted to go full John Wayne and pull everybody against each other. And our side is not doing that. We've gathered oil companies together, we've gathered environmental groups and everyday Albertans. And you know what the results were? 2 pipelines. We've got the permissions. We're going to keep going, and we're going to get those pipeline shovels in the ground soon.
In 2006, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund paid $200,000 to a pair of Canadian charities, the Pembina Foundation, which funds the Pembina Institute, and West Coast Environmental Law. The thing that caught my attention is that those payments to prevent the development of a pipeline and tanker port specified that the reason for doing so was to protect the Great Bear Rainforest.
Long before I got into council, we had an initiative to save the Kitlow, and environmentalists had become a part of that campaign. I was running a charter boat at the time, and I was running people in and out of there with my brothers. I was listening to the rhetoric, and I was listening to what was being said at public meetings and everything. I was drinking the Kool-Aid back then. I really thought, oh great, we're going to save the world, we save Kitlow, and what really cemented me the idea of protecting this rainforest was because my community had no part in the economy up to then. But these environmentalists on the fringes said that if we protect the rainforest and protect it from logging, then we could create an economy for tourism and everybody could get jobs. Well, they protected the rainforest in an order in council through BC, and not one job materialized except for a few key people that were inside the circle of the actual protest itself. And nothing changed for my community.
The Great Bear, also called the Great Spirit Bear, is actually black bear. It's a phase or a variety of the black bear that's blonde. Beautiful bear. And there's about 100 of them in a relatively small area of the north coast of BC. The Rockefellers know very well where the bear lives because in the 1990s they funded the original study of the area. And if they had stuck to protecting that, that would be great. But that's not what they're doing. So now environmental groups and even the government of British Columbia would have us believe that the Great Bear Rainforest extends all the way from the north end of Vancouver Island to the south of Alaska, and then this ecosystem just comes to a screeching halt.
A groundbreaking deal that will protect much of BC's Great Bear Rainforest. The agreement covers 6.4 million hectares of land near Bella Coola. Under terms of an agreement between the province, First Nations, forest companies and environmentalists, 85% of the old-growth forest will be permanently protected. Logging will still be allowed in the other 15% under strict conditions.
The Great Bear Rainforest is there's no question, it's a jewel in the crown of magnificent landscape in British Columbia. And it's a jewel for all Canadians.
You know, we had the Jerry Buttses and that whole group, that group of people that created the title Great Bear Rainforest. Our own people fed into that. They all came together and they won the battle. They won the battle of that day in terms of putting together a well-developed plan of propaganda.
As far back as 2012, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund funded the New Venture Fund, specifically to get a limit or a cap put on production of oil out of Alberta. And of course, when the former Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, brought in her climate plan in 2015, that's exactly what she did.
Friends, the government of Alberta is going to stop being the problem, and we are going to start being the solution.
With us are people and organizations who have long called for action on climate change. Steve Williams of Suncor, Brian Ferguson of Cenovus, Lorraine Mitchell-Moore of Shell. The emissions limit legislation, the idea, the genesis for it, Madam Speaker, came to us through collaborative conversations between the oil sands industry, between First Nations, municipalities, and from environmental groups, Madam Speaker.
Alberta also increased its carbon tax and created the world's largest boreal forest preserve. It's huge, twice the size of Vancouver Island.
Until recently, Canada's best prospects for meeting other markets was through the proposed Keystone XL pipeline.
It's 2019 now, and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund is still funding activism against the Keystone Pipeline. The most recent payment was in May of 2019, $50,000 to a group in Nebraska.
When you consider that Canada's population is less than the state of California, they need resources. We are right here. We are the world's longest unarmed border. We're easy picking. And so right now, the picking is economically.
Make no mistake, the industries are not saints. They are not saints at all. But they sure are a night and day difference from what they were doing 30 years ago.
Whether it was the Rockefellers' intention or not, what is being protected is the American monopoly that has Canada over a barrel and is subsidizing the price of gas in the United States to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. Now, under Justin Trudeau, the federal government has banned oil tanker traffic on the north coast of BC with Bill C-48.
Let's go over a little bit of a graph. So this is oil production. Now, this is quite important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a time lapse. And we're going to kind of key through this for all my viewers to actually see the politics involved and where the money goes. Now, 1912. This is the top oil producers on the globe. Watch carefully. 1926. We're looking at war. 1937. Second war. Pay attention carefully to the bottom, and as oil comes up, you will see there's a lot going on in the world during this time, which is also the birth of Israel after the Second World War. And this is where a lot of people, old money, especially American money, people who are like the Rockefellers, who know where the oil reserves are, start swinging deals and pushing power and politics in order to create nations. They're taking the tribes of all of the Middle East and they're consolidating them into, well, business partners. Now, by the end of the war, Venezuela is already starting to do some mass production. Now, there's a little bit more history that goes on in this, but you will start to notice Saudi Arabia is really starting to pump out the oil, followed by Iraq, and Canada enters the scene. Now, by 1962, Saudi Arabia and Iraq, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates are starting to really pump out the oil, as it took time for a consolidation of the tribes and to make sure the families that the oil oligarchs wanted are now seated in power. In the meantime, Canada's just learning about these, wow, big puddles of oil on the surface of the earth and how to extract this oil. The United States is just kind of starting to fall a little wee bit. But don't worry, the multi-millionaires at the time, which would be billionaires and now trillionaires, are making huge amounts of money on Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. Move along. Oh, 1978. This is where the Americans started to really take over their government. Corporations and family interests started to control the House and the Senate. These families wanted to ensure they could make vast fortunes and start limiting the power of other countries who were onto them, like Venezuela. Take note of Venezuela's oil production. But what was growing? Oh, well, now Iraq is starting to become a serious contender. In the meantime, Saudi Arabia's family has now established a full controlled powerhouse over its country, in cahoots with oil companies. But don't worry, the separation comes right away. Boom! Now you take a look and you can see, by the mid-1980s, there was a huge separation of power. Well, the king decided, wait a minute, why am I giving money to these families? Let's cut them off. Thus, the big oil embargoes. Do you remember the big, oh, there's no more oil on the planet, blah, 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 bullcrap? all of this power, all of these politics, all of these nations' leaders are bought and paid for. And in the meantime, there's Canada fighting hard to struggle to get by under heavy, heavy Laurentian elite power, who, by the way, like Trudeau's family, makes piles of money off of importing blood oil. Now, by now, the National Oil Socialism has taken over Canada. You can see that, well, we kind of plateaued and took a bit of a drop. And the reason being is, well, Trudeau and his investors, or should I say sponsors, the Liberal Party, wanted to try and take the oil from the people. They wanted to take free enterprise, free market, and they wanted to socialize it. So they did so by doing stupid things like capping production, making sure that the government stole vast amount of money, and all the rest of the crap that came along with it. The National Energy Project was in full swing, and down went Canada. In the meantime, well, all the Laurentian elites who are invested in other countries, especially linked to rich families like, the Rockefellers and other oil oligarchs that were, well, generational wealth, wanted to ensure our oil only went to the States. This way, their American sponsors, the people who kept them in power, who controlled a lot of the propaganda, could push and keep these liberals in power. We move on. Lo and behold, Russia steps onto the scene. Now, they'd been producing but weren't showing people what they were doing. And by the time they came out, they realized, and especially if you take a close look at the year 1985, socialist oligarchy had now come onto the market in full swing. And then, of course, with it, a whole bunch of politics, which started to really divulge the truth of socialism. And then with a lot of the military battles that were going on through different Middle East countries as Russia was starting to push its influence. And you got to remember, 99% of these wars are purposely started for power and money. And the majority of that comes through resources. Now we live in a tech world where, well, rare earth is becoming the new oil. But the problem is the world can't go on, can't move, and can't live without our oil and gas. But they're having problems because now they have to try and deal with a multifaceted ideology in order to control more than one or two products. Now they have to focus on a global outcome of all of these other nations who before never meant anything. They could just be abused. Now these nations had resources that were just as powerful and gaining more power than oil and gas. Thus we start to see a big swing. If you take a close look, Norway moves on. They do a different nationalization of oil. They start pushing for the idea that a free market with a mild taxation on the people could start to tax corporations and take a vested interest in the actual resources that they were drilling and mining. This creates a system in which the people have a very low tax base. The corporations, even though they're now a free market, have to pay big dividends, big taxes to these countries. this is where you start to see, like Poilievre says, all of these projects, they get built quickly. Well, because the market is free, you can drill, we're going to take taxes off it. Kind of the same thing that, well, Poilievre is trying to get across. Danielle Smith, Scott Moe are trying to get across. If we allow the production, the government starts to increase the actual amount of revenue coming in. This gets dispersed to the people through social programs, cutting taxes, better Medicare, mental health, jails, policing. But our government is so sold out to the oligarchs. They don't care about you. They don't care. All they care about is profit and power. We'll move on. Now, by 2014, check out Canada's production. Well, what happened that started this huge curve in Canada's production? Well, in 2008, Keystone was built. This secured the oligarchs in the United States. It landlocked us and guaranteed them the ability to buy oil at huge discounts, which then not only did they profit from, but from the job creations garnered political support. Well, look at all of these states, all the jobs we've created. Look at the GDP going up. Vote for this party, vote for this candidate. Look what we're doing. Our government sold us out. Now, in the same context, it was beneficial to Canada because at least our oil was getting to market. But the problem being, like Vivian Krause stated, we were selling our oil at untold losses. Canada as a whole could have been making 60 to 140% more off of revenue, the tax revenue, if we were selling it at fair market value. But because the Americans, through their influence and control on our system, well, they got all the pros. We got crumbs. Check it out right here. 2007, 2008, Keystone goes into production. Canada starts distributing oil. We now come on to a global index. We are now considered an actual oil producing nation. Let's move on. Now, check out our numbers. And what happens right here? 2017, 18, 19, 20, drop. Well, this would be the presumption of an oil cap. This would be the subduction, the complete destruction of any further revenue, and the last of the oil companies and the free market fleeing the country because there is no business case left. All of the laws that the Trudeau government has put in has consolidated all of Alberta's wealth to the United States of America. Independent and free markets have collapsed. It's only those who are part of the American system that now benefit. There's no business case because the Liberal Party ensured to protect the United States and the oligarchs who keep pushing, promoting and keeping the Liberal Party in power all of the money. And here we are today. Now, yes, we do sell our oil. All of these profits, all the way back to where Keystone was put in, this you could multiply by a factor of 40 in tax revenue, has been milked from our country and Alberta and Saskatchewan, parts of BC and Manitoba, who helped to lubricate the system with their oils, all robbed from all the citizens of Canada. You like your taxes? Really? Think of the money lost, all because, well, the Liberals are forcing us, and really we already are, the 51st state.
Call it a tanker ban, but actually it's an export ban because it doesn't stop any of the oil tankers from Alaska or anywhere else from importing oil into the lower 48.
The Great Bear Rainforest is no place for a pipeline.
Offensive, strangling, devastating. Those were just some of the words used to describe Bill C-48 today. That bill would essentially ban all oil tanker traffic off the coast of British Columbia.
So when we started talking about coastal protection, hooray, we got no. C-48 went through, it won by 3 votes. We're not going to have tankers on the North Coast. Everybody celebrates. Not a time to celebrate because 8.6 billion gallons of crude went by Haida Gwaii from Valdez alone to the lower 48 last year.
Now, we had battles within our family because there were those who live out there who were part of this brainwashing. And when we tried to point this out, now this what happened within our family was a decade ago and continued for a few years. And they refused, absolutely refused to believe that there were oil tankers going by their door. And when they did finally understand and look out their window and realize, they were like, well, those are Canadian, or well, those are, that's irrelevant, those are going to dwindle off, that's not. They weren't aware, most of them still aren't, that they created the 51st state. They gave away their Canadianism. They sold out unwittingly, completely brainwashed by all of the schools, the media, the politicians, and the NGOs who were constantly bombarding them with misinformation and lies. It divided our family. It created, well, a division between those willing to actually talk and those who shoved their head in the sand and put their ankles up. Elbows up, ankles up. Same thing. Now, with everything that's going down with the big orange bad man, they're saying, well, it was all your problem. You're voting conservative. We should need him in a majority. We need it. Completely oblivious to the reality. They sold us out. Now, this brings me back to one of my very earlier episodes. What do you actually think Trump and the turd talked about? When the turd came home, well, with his diapers full, and realized what was going on. I love to have been a fly on the wall. But from a lot of the different threads I've read, and from a lot of the different video that I've put together by those who were there, Trump pretty much told him, thank you. You have no power. I can now crush you. All because you're an idiot. You are, as he puts the dunce hat on our glorious liberal leader, the governor of Canada. Trump knows what's going on. Trump is a businessman. Yes, he's doing the States a great job. He doesn't care about us either. What he does care about is making sure all of the oligarchs who helped get him into power get their dues. He's not going to let us build pipelines. And with Carney at the helm, he has Canada. Carney is burying us daily because Carney is invested in the States. Carney is part of that group who doesn't care. Trump knows this. Trump's not an idiot. And Trump's divided. He has those who are fighting for the people, which I actually believe Trump really does care for. Seeing what he's doing to the lower and middle class, the benefits he's giving, the jobs he's creating. But Trump's also like a Caesar. He'll do anything to take more power, to build his new business, which is the United States of America, and conquer whatever he wants or deems necessary to make his name last forever. And Carney's now on the chopping block because Carney is already surrounded by an entire Liberal Party who has sold our soul to the devil. A 36-page report entitled Elections Canada Complaint Regarding Foreign Influence in the 2015 Canadian Elections alleges third parties worked with each other to bypass federal election spending limits, all of which appears to be in contravention of the Canadian Elections Act. Foreign money funneled towards Canadian political advocacy groups affected the outcome of the 2015 federal election, according to documents filed with Elections Canada and obtained by the Calgary Herald in May 2017. Now, as on previous episodes, I have pretty much shown, our Elections Canada is completely compromised. We now have a voting system and a voting electorate, the Canada Elections Act, the Canada Elections Council, the entirety of what it is has been completely infiltrated by dopeheads, by people who don't care about anybody's right to vote, their right to the ability to have a say in our country's future. This is all sold as is when you have votes that we've proven, previous episodes, could have taken 2 seats minimum, that the, courts and electoral said, no, those ones, sorry, we're not recognizing those, but we're going to give them to the Liberals for winning by 1 seat. Analysis of an October 2006 Tides Foundation conference reveals the establishment of a national institution to act as a social investment bank to support the social economy on a worldwide basis. Welcome to Chinata. Listen carefully. The Social Investment Bank, brainchild of the George Soros-linked Tides Canada Foundation, was established by the Liberals as the, drumroll, Canada Infrastructure Bank in 2017. Investigative journalist Vivian Krause estimates that between 2000 and 2012, American donors poured roughly $300 million into controversial Canadian environmental groups that interfered with domestic politics. When a researcher uncovered the depth of the U.S. donor involvement in Canada, the Canadian government withdrew a $8.3 million funding agreement with Tides Canada Foundation. Why would they do that? Major donors to the foundation include George Soros' foundation to promote open society, $10,200,000 and change. George Soros Open Society Foundation's $12,100,000 and change. Rockefeller's Brothers Fund, $5 million and change. Rockefeller Family Fund, $460,000. Rockefeller Foundation's $1,660,000 and change. Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, $3,500,000 and change. In total, the 114 third parties were funded by California and New York-based Tides Foundation, known in Canada for holding anti-Canadian oil campaigns focused primarily on the Alberta oil sands. You wonder why us out west want out? This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is not a partisan issue by Conservatives. This is a Canadian issue. This affects all Canadians, whether you're an NDP, Green, Liberal, or Conservative. Problem being, the NDP, Green, and Liberals are all infiltrated. Most of their members sit on foundations, are part of foundations, promote foundations, are sponsored by foundations, all of which are part of the oil oligarchy of the United States, which are now part of the global elite pushing the green agenda. Who else is doing that? Previous episodes, people. That would be Mark, the investor, Carney. Now, let's just kind of move on a little wee bit. Third-party activists, groups getting money from the Summer Jobs Grant. Well, let's just let Vivian nail all this down.
And 278 ships are going by Haida Gwaii every year, without question. You know, this is going on. So we don't have protection.
We are price takers, we are not price getters, and that needs to change. When I see, if one of my neighbors was doing that to me, I'd get bloody angry about it.
The organizations that have led the charge to create the Great Bear Rainforest are Tides Canada and Coastal First Nations.
We heard it far too many times at our table, Tides Canada. And we heard some people were too happy to tell us that, well, we know where they're getting their money from. They're getting it from Tides Canada. And you know what? They're getting millions.
Back in 2004, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund paid $1 million for the capital to create Coastal First Nations and another $100,000 for startup. And then on Christmas Eve, 2004, a non-profit called the Coast Economic Development Society was incorporated. But as far as I can tell, it was financially inactive for the next 3 years until it got funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the same foundation that funds the campaign against salmon farming and has since poured at least $270 million into activism in Canada. Coastal First Nations, $30 million, Tides Canada, at least $85 million, one grant alone in 2015 for $10 million.
Well, we knew there was some pretty heavy-duty money coming in from somewhere because the aggression was too strong and it was too directed. And it was directed to any group that dare spoke about anything oil and gas. And not once did they ever attempt to ask us what our place was within that that industry.
Rockefeller's
This
brothers,
issue is as black
New
and white
Venture
as a
Fund
killer
declined
whale.
again.
Saying no to the Enbridge pipeline is as black and white as the killer whales that are threatened by that pipeline.
The crowd was led to dance like Canadian animals such as the orca.
I mean, we're underdogs, sure. But some movements have spent billions of dollars going nowhere. I know I've spent some of it. As a digital guy, I spent my career for a lot of clients building fake grassroots campaigns that tried to surround a target and make it seem like there was a social movement happening and scare them into making a decision.
Don't spend your time on environmental protection and getting First Nation youth who are unemployed and angry. Don't get them to protest against projects. It's the same teenagers who commit suicide day in and day out within our communities. It is so unfair and cruel. It's a human crisis that these environmentalists don't care about.
I'd never wanted my kids to go through what I went through, going from job to unemployment insurance to welfare. I mean, I grew up through the 80s and 90s as a young man, struggling to find a job. I got into drugs when I was 14 years old, and it just seemed natural. Nobody thought it was a bad thing. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, me and my wife were talking about it, and I was trying to put into context for people what it really meant at the ground level for people like us. And just off the top of our heads, we recounted 14 people who committed suicide that I had to go to funerals for in my lifetime.
Those agendas, they're basically taking advantage of the situation that we're in, and that's poverty. And I think that when they come in with their own agendas and write checks, and it's self-serving, and they're basically just using us, and these environments come in and pay us, and then they're gone, and the agendas, you know, they got what they accomplished, and we're still sitting here in poverty.
Now, this doesn't just go for the reserves. This goes for every Canadian. I myself, in the course of the last 10 years, just 10 years, have watched nine, just the last 10 years, actually, correction, 7 years, take their lives because of the, well, destruction to their way of life. They couldn't pay bills. All of this Soros tides, brainwashing that was taking over, and the word is woke, the woke culture, decimating the middle class, the stresses of them losing everything, became too much. This is toxic masculinity, I take it. That's how the wokeism calls it. They don't take into account that the largest suicide rates are in men. Good men. People I work beside 12 hours a day. We smiled and joked, sweating, working in 40 above to 67 below, chuckling at the pain of freezing and watching our fingernails and sometimes tips come off in our gloves. While the Trudeau Liberal Social Fascist Party, controlled by the oligarchs, the global elite, shut us down. This isn't just a native problem. This is a Canadian problem. My heart weeps every day I think about it. These were people, some with families. Some had amazing potential. All of them did. Some more than others. Gone. Because they were driven into poverty. They lost everything while watching America rake in the dollars, and our Canadian values get flushed down the toilet from attacks from the woke. This entire green agenda is a socialist agenda pushed upon us through our schools, our propaganda, and our fascist governments, the NDP and Liberals, and you saw it in the election. They are the same party. They don't care about you. They don't care about Canada. They don't give a flying fart for any individual on the face of the planet. All they really care about is their own power, success, and financial well-being. You are a peon. You are nothing to them. Let's go back in the past a little bit. We won't stop until the Conservative government is out of power. We won't stop until Enbridge Pipeline is stopped, Devon told CBC after the stunt, promising to go to great lengths. Now, does this sound familiar to what the propaganda, the NDP, don't forget the Greens. They're in this thick as thieves. Elizabeth May, I think this is half the reason she drinks. It's her soul inside, dying, knowing the wrong she is doing to our nation and to our citizens. Mr. Devlin is a well-known activist and man of many hats. He's a stand-up comedian. He's also a central figure in a network of activists supported by the U.S. Tides Foundation. The hub of his network is Hollyhock, an oceanfront retreat center situated on Courts, a remote island in British Columbia. Devlin is also part of a Truthful Communications, a company that provides creative and strategic services to various organizations including Vision Vancouver, the political party of Vancouver's mayor, Gregor Robertson. Truthful has also done work with Lead Now, Greenpeace, both of which are funded by Tides and other sources. Mind I say, I'll be dealing with this in future episodes. One of the original architects of Greenpeace fled and exposes them for who they are daily. Hell, the founder of the Weather Network has already come out going, all of this green crap, this carbon, are lies. These people are ousted. It doesn't matter how high your position. You cannot even begin to think of the power of the American oligarchs, which are now the global elite. You are owned, and you will own nothing.
If I'm going to say no to something, I better find another way to put a meal on the man's table or his family's. Just don't say no and walk away, because that's irresponsible and that's almost genocidal.
They came in and they propped up the minority and they turned it into a big fight where Haislas were fighting against Haislas. We ended up in court, tore our community apart, tore our family apart, and then when all the dust settled and we realized, actually, all that wasn't true. It was all built on a lie.
Most of the fun.
A lot like what the federal government, our fascist liberals, are doing today with the Indigenous. Telling us, oh, there's buried bodies. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. There are graves, unmarked, from years of neglect. There are no incinerators. There are no piles, holes filled. This is all psychological warfare. Divide and conquer. Fear, hate, and division. Tactics used to divide us on our own playing field, while the rich play foosball, using us against each other. We are a laughingstock. The rich, the liberals, Carney is sitting back right now while his stocks soar, while his investors applaud him, while the oligarchs roar in cheers of glory as they make mass profits, and as the United States regains the power it has been trying and working behind the scenes with these oligarchs and families to finally get back the power they want. Here we are, peons, slaves, fighting each other over what? The scraps of a chocolate cake, a crumb, maybe a chip of some sweetness good, only tomorrow to realize there was no nourishment and we're starving. We're being taxed beyond our own capability of surviving.
Funding from the Moore Foundation, well over $100 million, has gone towards what they call marine planning, especially for the north coast of British Columbia. That money went to First Nations, environmental groups, and even the BC government for the development of 4 marine plans for the coast of British Columbia. None of them would allow for any tankers or ports, or pipelines, or other infrastructure that is necessary for the overseas exports of Canadian oil and natural gas.
Just this past year, the people that actually organized the Great Bear Rainforest are now proposing to set up right beside it the Great Bear Sea. Now, is it just coincidence that the Great Bear Sea includes a shipping lane that LNG tankers will travel to get LNG from Kitimat over to Asia? I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's another tactic. Let's sterilize land, let's sterilize waterways, and in that way, indirectly, we can shut down industry.
Now, Aaron Gunn has a few amazing documentaries on this, and I'm going to post the links to it. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to him. Now, I know he's now in politics, and he is kicking it. He is doing an amazing job. But I really, really need people to be aware that there aren't just 1 or 2 voices that have been calling this out. This whole Wet'suwet'en bull crap. These people are all paid. This king, unappointed, I'm a bloodline. Bull crap. I'm sorry. My past? We would have walked in there and we would have eliminated that tribe. That's the way it was back then. We live in a civilized world nowadays, so we can vote. We can actually have a say. But it's still very good for us to sit amongst each other, pass the pipe, and understand and listen to each person's words, to communicate, to have dialogue, uncensored. That's not what's going on. And like I said, Aaron Gunn has done some amazing documentaries. I will post all the links in this video. Let's get back.
No doubt about it, the coast of British Columbia is spectacularly beautiful. Alaska is pretty special too. The Oregon coast, California, it's beautiful. But the only place where there's a decade-long, multi-million-dollar Rockefeller-funded campaign to stop oil tanker traffic is in British Columbia. In California, you've got oil rigs right on the beach. One of the key organizations in the marine planning process funded by the Moore Foundation is the World Wildlife Fund Canada. which is funded specifically for facilitating federal government commitment. During the early years, the president of the Rural Wildlife Fund Canada was Gerald Butts, until he resigned to run the leadership and then the election campaigns for Justin Trudeau. One of the last grants that Rural Wildlife Fund was still president.
Why do you think they picked Gerald Butts? Think carefully. I've studied propaganda for decades. I know why. Most of my subscribers know why. Because he was successful and figured out in today's day and age how to use the Marxist propaganda machine in order to control the masses. And he did just that. He was so brilliant in his propaganda, he used his own fall from grace not only to keep promoting the turd and the liberals, but to reincarnate himself quietly in the back shadows behind the curtain to now be part of Carney, your next glorious dictator. All hail Carney. Elbows up, head in the sand, ankles in the United States, arms.
Was $2 million specifically for achieving the conditions and relationships conducive to marine planning. After he resigned, Rural Wildlife Fund paid Gerald Butts roughly $400,000 as severance. We know it was severance because Mr. Butts has said so on Twitter. Under Justin Trudeau, one of the first things that the federal government did in 2015 was to approve the type of marine plans that had been funded by the Moore Foundation, setting aside a huge area of coastal Canada, roughly the size of Saskatchewan.
You say tankers, no! Tankers! No! Tankers! When I say stand with, you say Tiny House Warriors, stand with!
Another organization funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund is OPEN, the Online Progressive Engagement Network. 2015 annual report, OPEN reports that it ran a Canadian campaign that, quote, moved the needle during the 2015 federal election, contributing greatly to the ousting of the Conservative Harper government.
Which is what I read to you. Now listen carefully.
How did it do that? Well, OPEN is the parent organization of a Canadian nonprofit called Lead Now. Lead Now portrays itself as a youth movement, the brainchild of two university students. But there's more to it than that. Lead Now says that it is supported by more than 2,000 Canadians, and no doubt it is. But where did Lead Now get its original donor base? According to Stratcom, a company created with capital from the Tides Foundation, Stratcom put together Lead Now's database of 1,800 donors. As I was watching the 2015 federal election, I noticed Lead Now, and they were so slick. I thought, who is this organization?
All right, what's this all about? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, our goal is to create a new way for Canadians to come together online, to talk about their hopes, their shared hopes and priorities for the country, and to create a really strong voice that's going to be heard in Ottawa.
One of the things I found is their original business plan, which called for $16 million over 10 years. I also found photographs of Lead Now attending a meeting with the Rockefeller Brothers Fund in 2012 and other meetings with OPEN in England and in Australia. Lead Now claims credit for having defeated at least 25 Conservative incumbents in the 2015 federal election.
Now, let's go back to this. Third-party activist groups getting money from Summer Jobs Grant. The Trudeau Liberals are using taxpayer dollars to fund political groups that use foreign funding to advance a leftist agenda in Canada. These controversial and divisive activist groups have received money from the federal government through the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, the Sun has learned. Lead Now is currently running a negative advertisement campaign against Ontario PC leader Doug Ford. The Ontario branch of Lead Now is a registered third-party advertiser in the provincial campaign, and yet it's also receiving funding from the Trudeau government. According to the Canada Summers Jobs website, Lead Now Society will receive 2 grants for its operations in British Columbia. Hello, Liberal NDP controlled, leftist, uneducated, unaware province. Hello. That spreads false information about the Progressive Conservatives. Their campaign claims that Ford will engineer massive tax cuts for the rich, slash public services, and make Ontario less safe for minorities. Ford has not pledged to cut taxes for wealthy, blah, 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 blah. We all know about Ford. He's a Liberal anyways. And he ended up coming out kissing Trudeau's butt. Well, I ended up finding a little bit of documents I'll be releasing in further episodes, kind of showing I think there was a catch-all. I got a little bit more research to do, but I think this is why they ended up gaining power and keeping power, because Trudeau wouldn't badmouth him and he wouldn't badmouth Trudeau. Kind of the same way he's doing to Carney, kissing Carney's butt, propping him up. This gives him the alternate idea, the chances of running for the leader of the Conservative Party. Are you seeing where this goes? Are you seeing how gross and negligent all of the media, the mainstream media, and our politicians are on actually being able to speak truth to power? It's independent media like myself that has to get the word out. Please like, share, and subscribe. If I can keep this channel afloat, if I could actually possibly hit enough subscribers and viewers to make money, I will have the time to put all of this together and be able to start to expose the reality of how corrupt these politicians and political parties are.
So what's wrong with an organization like Lead Now trying to influence Canada's elections? Well, if Lead Now is just a youth movement, that's fine. But the truth is that Lead Now is part of a Rockefeller-funded network of organizations that aims to swing elections in foreign countries. And that, no pun intended, needs to be out in the open.
Lead Now was investigated by Elections Canada during 2017 and 18. None of Lead Now's activities were found illegal.
When you look at charitable organizations that have ulterior motives that damage Canada, that charitable standing needs to be pulled. They need to be banned from working in Canada. Our national government needs to audit. They need to look deep into where the money is coming from, where it's going to.
What they've done to us is actually brilliant. It's pure brilliance, because they're not doing it themselves. They're getting Canadians to do it to ourselves. And I don't think Canadians understand that this is what's happening to them. It's in a larger scale, they're doing to Canada what they did to my community. So I don't think Canada really understands that the real war here is an outside force pitting Canadians against Canadians.
The following organizations either did not respond or declined to the invitation to be interviewed for this documentary. Coastal First Nations Stand, formerly Forest Ethics, West Coast Environmental Law, Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, Global Green Giants, Greenpeace Canada, New Venture Fund, Net Change, Equal Justice Canada, Corp Ethics, Tides Canada Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers, William and Floral Hewlett Foundation, Tides Foundation, Pembina Institute, Environmental Defence Canada, World Wildlife Fund Canada, Oak Foundation, and the Sisu Institute. Now, I know a lot of you viewers are probably sitting at home going, holy cow, how come we have never seen or heard of any of this evidence? Well, how can you possibly ever get any reality? Can you ever get any truth when you have media like this? Yes, CBC. Is green hushing such a bad thing? Also, in parts of Canada, you can now grow plants that you couldn't before. Oh boy. With banks and asset managers bailing on sustainability partnerships, some companies removing carbon emission goals, and regulator of those industries pausing climate disclosure rules, and the U.S. administration that's hunting for environmental initiatives in state laws. Yeah, the times are changing from a climate action rah-rahs to just a few years ago. That sudden silence has a name in some circles. Green hushing, where companies or governments erase environmental commitments, fearing potential political investor or customer backlash. But some experts believe that the work is continuing quietly. What's more, they say, those that still do it vocally can serve as a more genuine example of how to champion climate action. Propaganda, people. This is how they do what they do. This is the crap they constantly pump down Canadians' throats. It never ends. This is why the government has no right, and it should be legislated into law. The government can never, ever give money to media. And any media in cahoots with a government should lose their license and become barred from ever calling themselves or being part of a news organization. This is disgusting. This is the liberal fascist government. This is Carney, and we are the 51st state because of it. Now, let's not forget the other players, and there's many. I'm going to put a point out on this absolute disgrace of a so-called environmentalist, Mr. Suzuki. This is a great article. One might ask, what does David Suzuki, the two-faced hypocrite, have to do with northern BC? Almost every environmentalist concerned is overshadowing by his perpetual condemnation regardless of science and proven safeguards. One might even think it is his ultimate revenge on BC after what he interned with his family during the Second World War. His fingerprints are all over every oil and gas development project in northern BC, most recently through his grandson Tambo Campos, and his film Klabana Keepers. Klabana Teabene is the Tahitian name for the headwaters of the four salmons-bearing rivers that collapsed in blah 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 blah. What's David Suzuki's net worth? David accumulates a net worth of $25 million from his career as a Canadian environmental activist and science broadcaster. He is an owner of 4 homes and co-owns a fossil fuel company. Oh my! Yes. Do you think CBC wants you to know this? No. He's been pushing this propaganda before CBC was bought and paid for and turned into the Gestapo's media machine. His Vancouver mansion that lies in the Kisilano neighborhood is estimated to be worth $8.2 million. David's waterfront property in the Quadra Island area has a value of $1.1 million. David also has a co-founder of a Vancouver-based environmental organization, David Suzuki Foundation, since 1990. Now, again, I'm going to post this article in there, and there's a lot more to him. One of his family members actually came out and kind of exposed him years ago. Again, this is like, I wrote articles on this back in the day before I went digital. Evil, corrupt, bought and paid for, doesn't care about you, doesn't care about the environment. This man talks 99% of the stuff that he goes out and he talks like he's some specialist in. He's reading script from other people who actually specialize in the field. This guy is a 100% paid Gestapo propagandist. He is anything but an environmentalist. He can scream all he wants. I don't care. The information is out there. I will be exposing him more and more and more as this whole Western separation is growing and the fundamentals and principles of what the West is fighting to hold dear to us starts to become challenged. We will be exposing all of this corrupt fascist propaganda. He doesn't care about you. CBC don't care about you. All they care about is their lined pockets, their own wealth, their own jobs. They don't care. They don't care. Here's another great article. Klein, Carney sits idle as billions of dollars flow to the U.S. Again, I will be posting everything I show you. The links are in the description. I am not mainstream. I'm here for one main reason. The truth, nothing but the truth. I'm sorry, so sorry, just the facts, just the truth. These are things people need to see. They need to read. They need to actually have the ability to click and read the information. That's why I keep saying, like, share, and subscribe. You gotta help us get the word out. Prime Minister Mark Carney has been in office long enough for Canadians to start asking simple, unavoidable questions. What is he actually doing? Yes, great article. It's there, posted. Please, please take the time. Click on the link, read it. And one last thing before I call it the end of this episode. I know I'm burning it a little bit long. Could have actually kind of added this to the first one. Anyways, irrelevant. What do these people have in common? One of the major factors that fascist governments have, that people who buy votes have, people who are greedy and don't actually care, run you in debt. Well, guess what? Saskatchewan and Alberta, you have more mouths to feed because the watchdog just warned BC's government that borrowing $10.6 billion more than budgeted is going to make you a have-not province. Again, I'll be posting this on there as well. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I do apologize it took a little wee bit longer than I thought. But again, it's always worth that little bit of extra time to know that I am giving my viewing audience everything for them to make an educated and informed decision on their votes and an actual, truthful, knowledgeable newscast so they can sit back and go, how do we change this? Well, you can start by liking, sharing, and subscribing. That is a huge help. And if you are subscribed, please punch the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. You can also help support us because I don't make anything. I make a few pittance off of the clothing sales. Please check out my clothing line. Like I said, I'm doing a battle thing with the graphics. I got carried away. Wait, our graphics were too good. So we're gonna figure out a way in order to get all of this new product line. I've kind of, it's been like starting to back up now. I will have a lot more coming out, but the stuff that we do have, top notch. Read the comments. The supporters will tell you. It's great quality. Not only is the clothing top-notch quality, I wanted to make sure it was good quality, but the prints are top-notch. And if you've got the money, I know it's Canada, you can always support us with just a regular donation, money transfer to Canadian Citizen Journal at gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope I enlightened you. Until next time, I'm Alias Tagay. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. Stay informed.